Yeah. So here's how when I look around, I see most of the business altruists saying, how do we make this giant raging river more humane? How do we make it better? Let's fix or manipulate, or we'll put a little dike there and a dam there, and we'll create a little stream here. But they're all talking about working within the current incentive system in some way. And for me, I like to think about tools that allow us to invent tools. I like to think, how far towards the root cause can I go? Because the closer I get to the root cause, the more exponential the impact of a successful experiment there. So for me, I want to go to the top of the mountain. Okay, so this is the giant monoculture of capitalism and the shareholder economy. Mm-hmm. I would imagine this new foundation as, in this metaphor, we're going to tap wells up here. And each of them will be an entirely new stream with its own set of incentives rolling down this mountain, different and separate from capitalism. In some ways, strangely enough, similar to previous economic systems that have existed. Because I'm pro-commerce in all of this. Mm-hmm. I love the entrepreneurial impulse. The rules of this form of commerce are going to kill us.
Well, I was wondering, how is this different than capitalism? Because to my knowledge, now there's different ways people can take advantage of capitalism, sure. But capitalism is the idea of free market, right?
Sure.
Wouldn't this just kind of be capitalism 2.0?
I mean, you could argue about semantics, and I definitely have friends who use that. And maybe we would in the end. Maybe we would just say, okay, this includes profit motive. I can't imagine an incentive system with no profit motive. I'm not a fan of, Soviet communism. But I can't imagine incentive systems that involve profit motive, but also are so different in the what defines winning and losing, mm-hmm. that it would look pretty unrecognizable. I could imagine that.
Yeah.
And that's why I need those people with deep expertise to kind of join this foundation and be part of the founding team. And I have all these people in mind, like, Nick Hanauer, if you're out there, I'd really like to talk.
It sounds like you're saying there needs to be a fundamental shift in how we think as a society.
Yes.
So that we can then utilize this technology to make that happen, unlike we've not been able to make it happen
to address
before.
Those 3 pain points. So all of this, I've had a bunch of false starts in a book, and I'm going to isolate myself for a month and see how far along I can get. Mm-hmm. But this will all be in the book, and they're all really, I would give to this team with this really deep expertise. I'd say, here are the 3 things to me, and they may add to it, that are fatal flaws and unsustainable in the incentive system that has taken over the world. How do we invent a different incentive system that ameliorates or reverses this damage? And then we would come up with a lot of experiments. It's not one size fits all. Some of these economies would be culturally appropriate here and not there.
Right.
It's really about a trial and error, human-centered design approach to deploying these little incentive systems in very limited ways. And here's what I think would happen, going back to that metaphor of tapping wells to the top of the mountain. Most of them come up dry. We would have a high failure rate, and hopefully iterate and learn from each of those failures.
Sounds like the startup world.
Right. Well, This is where I've been pickled in this stuff at this point. And then a small percentage would demonstrate limited use case. They would become self-sustaining within specific bounds. And what I'm hoping is some of them might become larger rivers that solve for what I perceive as one of the biggest pain points on Earth. And if you read that piece I wrote, Deeply Connected, that was one failed book attempt. and in that, I'm imagining imagine this woman, she's 22, she just graduated top of her class at Harvard. She's industrious, she's brilliant, she's ambitious, and, she's also young. And so she still has a big, open, compassionate heart and wants to do good in the world. This is what her vocational choices look like. Go to a nonprofit, right? If you want to understand what's wrong with how we think of nonprofits, watch Dan Pelota's TED Talk on how we've messed up charity.
I'm actually really interested in that. Are you able to speak to that at all? I'll let you finish this point because I am interested in that.
So basically our legal system and everything we do is, I made lots of money, now I feel icky, I'm going to give it to the nice people. It's like buying indulgences. And it doesn't make for systemic change. And he suggests, better than I can, some other ways to think about those altruistic intentions. But going back to this woman, she's 22. She's like, okay, so I can earn starting salary of 30 grand at this nonprofit and feel incredibly good and in integrity and in alignment with my values that I am delivering something of deep use to people who desperately need it every day. But my impact's going to be tiny. Or I can go get a job, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, all these big companies, and I can get a starting 6-figure salary, and I can get super wealthy and then become a very powerful philanthropist, and I will have an exponentially larger impact on that cause if I just defer my philanthropy. And so the vast majority of people who have all of those, who are exceptional human beings, choose this route, right? And they defer that. And so when you get to start playing with incentive systems, let's say that you're a corporate lawyer and you're going to walk the crucible in your first few years at the firm, trying to make partner, but you're going to make hundreds of thousands of bucks a year, right? So you're killing yourself. For clients, I meet very few corporate attorneys who are deeply in touch in their work with what intrinsically motivates them, right? Their punishment is doing things they don't care that much about, and the reward is big money, right? Let's say this is 400 grand, or she could be earning 40 grand here. What if you could go to her and say, what if you could earn 200 grand and live in alignment with your values every day, straight out of college? What would that be like, right? Why can't we invent an incentive system that allows for that? And that would be my ultimate hope for this foundation, is that one of these incentive systems, we hit on the ability to fully align those things. So the most influential people joining the workforce, the people who will transform the future, are people who are able to live those values every day from the word go. They don't have to defer it. Because the history of the world, there's an archetype. King Ashoka, 3rd century BC in India, all the way up to Bill Gates. And that archetype is conquer, get exponentially rich and powerful, and then turn and become... We wouldn't have Buddhism without King Ashoka. But early on, man, he was not so cool. Lots of raping and pillaging and war. And then he had then he felt secure in his power.
Who is this? This is the...
If you look on one of the rupee notes in India, you'll see a column with lions on it. That's called an Ashokan column. This was an Indian king from I think the 3rd century BC. And so he's a major sort of ancient cultural hero in India. And when he became king, he made Buddhism the official state religion. Buddhism was one of...
So he's responsible for that.
That's why we have it. So, I mean, Buddhism was one of dozens of documented religions or philosophies in India at that time. Jainism was another one. Mahavira and the Buddha were contemporaries. They lived at the same time. But there were all kinds of them. Most of them disappeared. And eventually Buddhism actually died out in India, essentially, and thrived in other parts of Asia. But yeah, so I'd like to break that pattern, right? You don't have to conquer no matter what it takes, and work yourself into the ground and forego community and friendship and all these other things. You can have that your whole life and do good and not worry about sort of the material circumstances of your life.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump back into the nonprofit thing. I wasn't expecting us to go there, but I actually am, because
it's funny because you keep asking me to defend these people who I like really admire, who are better than me.
Well, maybe okay. I'll just plant seeds then for more people to come on.
Yeah, you should definitely
for more
go
episodes.
Chase Dan Pelota. I have a lot of respect for that guy.
No, yeah, okay, that'll be great. Well, do you know a lot of people or organizations or any case studies around the world that have been trying to do really altruistic efforts in the blockchain space that have tried this out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example of a very practical... So I'm an advisor to a company called RootProject. Founder Nick was also a founding partner in the bureau, and he's a friend. And I've been working with Gina and Nick to get real clarity on what they were doing. And it's so clear now. So you had all these blockchain startups, and it was like easy money's just flying into the coffers. Mm-hmm. And they're promising the moon and the stars, and and almost none of them are delivering. And I think you need to go back to real startup business fundamentals, right? He's got an owie, and we're going to address that in a way that we think is innovative and compelling, right? Just address the pain point. So what's the pain point? So for RootProject, the pain point is there's friction and a lot of struggle in nonprofits crowdfunding and raising money for campaigns. So
that's huge. I've family members who have worked in nonprofits for years, and this is
that's the pain point, right? That's the pain point. So you're the CEO of a nonprofit, and you would never say this in public, but we have a couple glasses of wine over dinner, and you're like, God, I spend all my time begging for money.
Yeah,
I hate it. I got in this to build schools for girls in Afghanistan, and I'm spending all my time hanging out with rich people hoping they'll give me money, or foundations or whatever. And they would all wish that the majority of they and their staff's time was focused on the intrinsically fulfilling experience of benefiting and educating these girls in Afghanistan. So what RootProject is trying to do is create an indelible ledger that is married to a reputation economy and a cryptocurrency. I'm sorry, that's a lot. Here's what it looks like. Again, I'll use an analogy. I'm an Airbnb host. I have never hosted a single person in my home. It's hard to get that first guest and start getting people recommending me because maybe my house is filthy, or maybe I'm psycho, or I'm unproven. By the time I've had 50 guests, all the opportunity is inbound, right? I've been thoroughly vetted in this reputation economy context, and things on autopilot, and I'm making this kind of mostly passive income. So there's an analogous opportunity there for nonprofits. If you use the RootProject platform the first time, if I'm really going to be honest, I think it'll probably be more of a pain in the ass than it would have been to go directly to funders. But if you're willing to run it through the platform, right, you're starting to build a reputation. So now your donor class has seen what happened with every penny that they ran through this indelible ledger to build these first 3 schools. And you have 3 up and operating, you have photographic evidence and all this other stuff, 3 up and operating schools for girls in Afghanistan. Now you go back to build a 4th school. The ambition, and it's going to be a hard thing to deliver for RootProject, is you as the CEO or whatever, or the leader, the executive director of that, click, $1 million. Why? Because you're a proven entity. And you have a reputation on the system, and the thing is in an indelible ledger in a decentralized way. It's unhackable, it's unfalsifiable. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm trying to think. Would it be? Can you compare this to say a more advanced Yelp page, kind of? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, you have a lot more real data, right? I mean. A big concern among...
But it's real.
Real,
It's not fake data.
It's real, verified. It's independently, indelibly... There it is. We each time you gave $100,000 here, and we built a little tiny school. We managed to raise $300,000 here, bigger school. $500,000 here, bigger school. And it's not just here are photos of everything. Here is literally what happened with all the money along the way.
I see. So there's a transparency to it.
It's a fully transparent,
that there isn't
indelible
really
ledger.
right now.
That there isn't really right now. That's what's different. And even if you were delivering this on a centralized database, it would still be, I think, a pretty powerful value proposition to nonprofits. I think this whole system, this indelible ledger system, is still nascent for RootProject. So there's going to be a lot of clunkiness, like every startup at the beginning. But on the plus side for the nonprofit, they're going to get tons of super hands-on support because the thing's new. And stuff might go wrong and be, we learned from that. Now we have to include that information, or actually this information is really sensitive. So actually we should hide it and it should only be accessible to this person. You can do all those.
Yeah, it's kind of like any app. You find out what works, what doesn't work, what's glitchy.
But here's the difference with RootProject, and I think it's a for-profit company. The thing that's different is a real pain point for real people who actually don't need to understand anything about blockchain to benefit from this. The world needs more companies and nonprofits using distributed ledger tech like that. And that's where I think we'll see the next upswing in the use of this, it'll be like it'll be so intuitive and useful. My mom will be like, oh, this is great. Like, oh, look, I'm getting passive income because all the hospitals want my medical data.
She can't text me, but she knows how to use this interface.
Yeah, and it's automatically, going through. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, amazing. So that's what you're doing now with the RootProject.
So that's RootProject. I mean, there's a bunch of projects I'm involved with. As I said, I was part of the Bureau, and most of the energy there at the Bureau right now is focused on getting their protocol off the ground. Our protocol off the ground. The promise of all of this has not been delivered at scale. So like I said right at the beginning of our interview, Ethereum was trying to get there. They're still not there.
What were they trying to do exactly?
In other words, an enterprise-ready blockchain protocol, a base layer protocol that people could build things on top of, that could handle the volume of data, the transactions per second, and the volume of data storage and everything that huge organizations or governments need, but doing it in a way that's cryptographically superior. It's much more secure and offers other advantages over traditional centralized databases.
And why haven't past platforms been able to do that? Is it because, and this is
many reasons.
This is me just being ignorant, but wouldn't it just be a matter of more people jumping onto the platform to then get that computational power involved?
The platforms crash. The platform's so far. So you have a consensus algorithm. So the first one was proof of work, right? That each computer doing a little math problem gets a little mined currency, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that the blockchain is accretive. All the information is stored on the blockchain. So when it was brand new, you could run it on a laptop or on a cell phone even. Well, no, you couldn't. But as it grew, it's requiring bigger and bigger computers. So it's growing so big that it's super slow and clunky. So proof of work is not long-term viable, in my opinion.
What is proof of work for our viewers who don't know?
That's the consensus algorithm behind the original Bitcoin. Yeah, and I'm not a technical guy, and we could go down a rabbit hole here, and you discover the limits of my knowledge. But there are other consensus algorithms out there right now, and they're all trying distributed proof of stake. At Dispatch, it's distributed asynchronous proof of stake, which I thought was actually a very brilliant innovation by the CTO, Zane Witherspoon. In that one, for instance, the blockchain grows linearly. But because a lot of information is accessed through keys off-chain, the information it manages can grow exponentially without the system crashing. And that's really, in that case, Dispatch's attempt to solve for this problem. I think someone will. Stellar is supposed to be working really well now, but primarily for financial transactions. Hyperledger has really gained a lot of market share. Consensus was the attempt to really push the Ethereum protocol out there and make it useful at huge scale. There's a bunch, and I learn about new stuff every day. There are things to learn, new things to learn every day. Yeah, I burn out on it a little bit in the sense that it's not what gets me jazzed. Like a deep technical understanding of the newest attempt. The objective gets me more jazzed, and the why gets me most excited of all. So, I really want to see these things deployed at scale in ways that benefit most of humanity, not a tiny elite. Mm-hmm. But we need people from that elite class to very magnanimously support that kind of infrastructure, an infrastructure that distributes the benefits very widely. And they're out there. That's why I called out Nick Hanauer. He's very on the record about that. Richard Branson is too. There's a handful of other entrepreneurs who are like that. I know we talked about this we touched on this a little bit beforehand, but how do you think we go about getting these, higher ups to think that way? Because, I think you're right in that our system right now, it's very profit driven. It's very, winners take all. Yeah. But how does that change? How does that mentality change? So you saw me with the book out here before we came in for the interview. Anand Dardas, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I met him once at a dinner for his wife's book launch, Priya Parker's book launch. He just wrote a book called Winners Take All, and the subtitle is The Elite Charade of Changing the World. And I think we're at a time where we need people of his integrity and willingness to speak truth to power. We need a lot more like him right now. He's completely right in a lot of his diagnoses. In how he suggests ameliorating some of the problems that we find, he's kind of, I would say, kind of retrogressive. You know, he wants to reinvigorate democracy and civil society and self-sacrifice. And I think we should. I think he's right. I just think that we should take many approaches all simultaneously. And so in his case, he's pointing out the fact that the way that, you know, impact investing funds and benefit corporations, all these attempts to create these win-win scenarios are allowed to have limited effect as long as they don't truly threaten the most wealthy and powerful and the systems that continue to make them wealthy and powerful. If you go to the depth of systemic change, you become a threat to your donor class. And that's an inherent conflict of interest there.
Is this what you were talking about in the Facebook example? I think you were saying that global capitalism right now disincentivizes Facebook from being open with their
the values. So
is that what you were?
Yeah. So here's another. I mean, if there's going to be another flaw in capitalism, we know it. It's this attempt to pretend as a large company, as a Goliath, that you are Switzerland. You're neutral. And it's laughable. I mean, it truly is laughable. It's a little wink, wink, nod, nod. If you want to know Facebook's ethics and values that they're expressing, they're implicit in all the things they do.
In their behavior. In
their behaviors. Look at their behaviors, extrapolate values, and you can see the values of Facebook. In my ideal future, you would go to a geographically non-specific online economy, and it would say right up there, we stand for these values at the top.
You think that would be good for all businesses?
Hear me out.
Okay.
So these are the values we believe in, right? And here's how we implement them structurally in this incentive system. If you see hypocrisy here, tell us. Point it out. We're just going to be forthright and transparent about the ethics that are driving this particular incentive system. If this resonates with you, you can participate. And if it doesn't, you don't have to. And yes, I think that the ultimate expression of all this would be I get to die in a world of diverse economies all over the world that are totally interoperable and are opt-in and are explicit about the values that they stand for. Mm-hmm. And that there's integrity, right? There's correlation between speech and action. We get into trouble when we get out of that.
But is it a good thing, though, that companies, specifically one like Facebook that has so much power and control over how people get their information, isn't it good that they're incentivized to maybe take a step back?
So the incentive there, and maybe this is a good incentive we want to retain from capitalism, maybe it's not, I don't know. The incentive there is don't diminish your potential user pool, right? That is what it looks like to me.
Because if they were to come straight out and just say, "I'm literally,"
they might be smaller. They might limit the
Right.
size. They might limit their growth. But the trade-off is they would be in integrity, right? Like we need to wrap our heads around. It's probably not good that we have companies as powerful as Google and Facebook. We can actually bake into the incentive layer delimiting factors that might keep them from becoming so powerful that they swing the elections of currently the most powerful country on earth, right? Like should a private company have even the capability to so heavily influence American elections?
But couldn't they technically, in this theory of being more open with their ethics or how they feel, couldn't they then purposefully swing things one way that they would want to if they're being more public?
So this is where we have to hope, right? So in that, there's no longer at least the duplicity, in my opinion. And we have to hope in the goodwill and good faith of most people, which I do. I mean, one of the great learnings of being an Airbnb host is, oh, wow, like most people are really great. And like 1 in 20 is kind of a nightmare, you know? But
1 in 20, yeah.
it's probably what
That is true. I mean, wasn't that the concern? I think a lot of investors talk about how they passed on Airbnb at first.
Yeah.
Because they're like, this is a disastrous idea.
People are going to come in and rob and rape and kill and
your house is going to get
They're just going to burn your house down.
Right.
Obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Same with Uber. Driving people around in your own car, it's a disaster.
But think about all the opportunities for trust-inducing business models. You know, if you have an indelible ledger, right, and you have a reputation that you want to protect, and that is somehow entirely unique to you and non-reproducible, you know, this is already how it works in the physical world. Bill Cosby will have a hard time doing a comedy special. But online, you can create a new profile, use someone else's photo, and voila, back in business. Mm-hmm. Right? Imagine you bring some of that accountability into the online world.
Well, and I imagine that if you get distributed ledger technology involved, that actually takes away the need to trust people. Because right now, I get in an Uber car or an Airbnb, let's say, and I trust that it's safe. The owner's not sitting in there like being crazy, whatever.
Waving a gun.
Or you trust that the people renting your space aren't gonna trash the place and then just leave or steal all your stuff.
Right.
Because you could have something.
You have recourse
in there that says if X, Y, Z, whatever happens, automatically
you have recourse.
You're getting fined or whatever it is.
Yeah, or you get an insurance claim or something like that. Yeah, so some people call these systems trustless. For me, that's a misnomer. Mm-hmm. I really think of them as you create a layer of software that is an inducement to trust and cooperation. But, you know, again, parable of the hammer, man. Like, there's so many ways to abuse this. There's so many ways that DLTs and cryptocurrency can be used to exacerbate and accelerate wealth polarization. Right. It can, you know, when Instagram sold to Facebook, what was it, like 12 employees for $50 billion or some crazy shit like that. Right. It's going faster and faster with fewer and fewer people reaping larger and larger rewards. Jared Lanier in Berkeley talks a lot about this. And he's right. And so what we need to do is these exponential, powerful tools, we need to curb that tide and stop accelerating these, you know, I think immoral trends. Like I just don't think there's any way around. They're not amoral, they're immoral. There's one of Anand's points in Winners Take All, which I think he's right about, is the people with the most need to start speaking the language of sacrifice. You know, economies are not zero-sum games, but the people at the top sacrificing more allows enormous alleviation of suffering and manifesting of human potential. Like that's the direction. That's the Star Trek future rather than the Mad Max future. That's the future I want for my daughter. You know, I mean, my daughter, it's like, let's work really hard to build Star Trek, and if it fails, I want her to be ready for Mad Max. You know, I want her to be able to find the clean water, because it's not alarmist anymore. Like. Yeah. That new UN report is positively dire. Everybody's talking about not how do we curtail climate change, but how do we adapt to a really inhospitable planet. I
haven't read that.
It's not happy reading, but it's real science. It's real science.
Yeah.
You know, it's empirical. It's not make-believe.
So what are some other companies that you're involved in or excited about right now?
Well, so kind of two categories. I'm a kind of a community junkie, so I go to a lot of different communities. I mentioned I run Good People, which is all built around meaningful conversations. But I love Renaissance Weekend. I'll be going there for New Year's Eve in Charleston.
What is that?
They've been around since 1981. It's Phil and Linda later. Like so many of these, it started as a dinner party. And it's become this big community. Now they do, my friend Ali is the executive director. And they do 4 or 5 per year all over the country. And most of them are 250, 300 people. And they move around to different cities or rural environments. spectacular ones. I was just in Beaver Creek, and I've been to Banff and Jackson Hole. The New Year's Eve one is the biggest, though. It's about 1,000 to 1,500 people, and it really takes over Charleston, and it's like black tie dancing, and until 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve. So I love that community, and I love it because it's eager learning, incredibly accomplished people. They have a lot of rituals that really flatten it. It's radically participatory. If you attend, you have to present. And I've always just walked away with incredible friends and we, 1 + 1 = 3 kind of relationships. I just got back from OC Impact. I told the co-founders, who are husband and wife, this morning that it was immediately one of my favorite communities in the world. And it's all about positive social impact, whether it's through nonprofits or for-profits or NGOs or governments.
Oh, that's right up your alley.
I met so many brilliant, sincere, caring human beings there. And so I'm really excited. I made a few proposals to them, and we're having a few conversations about how we can support each other.
Nice.
What else? I'm helping Nick. So Nick is the CEO and founder of RootProject. So it has that very altruistic set of intentions, but he's also a political economist. He did his PhD at Wisconsin. And so he's probably, RootProject is not going to probably throw off a ton of cash. So he's got a second company, Judge Research, which is just like market analytics on cryptocurrencies, which you kind of don't have thorough, detailed, and verifiable market insights on cryptocurrencies. So I'm helping them with some of the branding there, and we'll be doing some events there. My friend Mark Harrison, who I've known for many years. He was a diplomat. He's done all kinds of NGO projects. The dude is, for me, the quintessential, paradigmatic example of the business altruist. He speaks 6 languages natively.
Whoa.
He's a great listener, much better than me. He's a reminder to listen better. He's deeply caring and compassionate and savvy. And he's gone through periods of serious disillusionment in the last 5 or 10 years. So I was with him and his wife, Jackie. She's the CEO of a company called Boat Setter, which is basically Airbnb for boats. And I was hanging out with them, and she's doing great. That company's really doing well. They bought up a bunch of their competition. And so I was with them in Fort Lauderdale, and I was like, hey, I'm going next weekend to Cancun to OC Impact. And he was like, can I come? And managed to get him in there. And he lit up. And so by the end of it, he offered to make me a partner at his company.
Oh, wow.
Which is called AH Global. Which is
How many companies are you involved with?
Right now. So AH Global is like an influencer marketing thing. Basically, people want you to have an influencer marketing without any big outlay of cash. Gosh, how many am I involved with right now? So there's still Good People Dinners, which I've had for 6 years, and I started that. There's Judge Research, there's RootProject, there's AH Global. Gosh, I'm probably forgetting something.
You really are what was the word? Dilettante?
Yeah, dilettante. Yeah. And then the other one is basically a working Google document right now that I drafted. My friend Ramin Sarabi drafted it out of a conversation. He's also part of the whole altruistic startup ecosystem in San Francisco. And so where I'd like to be 6 months from now is basically I'm going to vanish for a month. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who offered me his place on the backside of the Sierras near a hot spring. No guests, no booze, no social media.
You're saying 1 day a week. You're not.
No speaking talking. 1 day a week. I can read and exercise as much as I want. And my deliverable at the end of a month is a minimum of 60,000 words, which is a book on incentive system design, essentially. And that'll be the foundation for this new foundation, which I hope will be able not just to diagram and invent incentive systems, but actually deploy them through software in partnership with NGOs. So 6 months from now, where I'd like to be is basically Good People Dinners, maybe by then has an executive director and a physical building, probably in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking for a business partner there. I may have found someone. And then this foundation is up and running. And we get an incredible advisory board. Kate Rayworth would be my number one at the top of the list. I hope she will consider.
She's the green donut?
She's the donut economics, green donut economist. Yeah, and then basically I want to do those two things. So like this is the conversation and this is the thing we do. And then I'm very old and the world is
and tired.
And the world is less lonely and more interesting, not just for people who are wealthy, but for everyone. And people have a new diversity of economies that they can choose to participate in if they feel like it.
Oh, I think that's a perfect place to end things. Well, good luck with all of these endeavors that are happening very quickly. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts on all of this.
We talked about a lot, didn't
we did talk about a lot. That's like we were just saying, welcome to Exploring Minds.
Yeah.
We talk a lot.
Thank you for inviting me on, Michele. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.